Okay, so we will finish ASP.NET today. Okay, so we'll finish the core concepts of ASP.NET. From tomorrow. We need to focus on MVC. In MVC, again, you need to learn, like all database operation, all CRUD operations using MVC architecture, then MVC core. Okay, right. And we are able to save the data. But the thing is, if we did not implement any validations, for example, when it comes to username, it is a mandatory field. Password is a mandatory field. Confirm password is mandatory field. And when it comes to password and confirm password, these two should be matched. And first name is a mandatory field, right? Gender is a mandatory field. Country, state. And when it comes to email, email should be provided in the expected format because it should contain @ as well as dot. When it comes to primary and secondary phone, primary should not be equivalent to secondary phone. So whenever I enter my data, click and save, it should take care of validating these rules. If all rules are satisfied, if the user has provided data as expected, then only the data should be saved into the database. Otherwise, it should not be saved. Okay. So for this, you can write your own validation. You can write your own C# code to validate it. But to just reduce some burden on the developer, your ASP.NET is providing some built-in validation controls. Okay, so those are going to be, the first validation control is going to be a required field validator. A required field validator. When some field is going to be mandatory. Okay, so whenever you want to make any field as mandatory, then you can make use of required field validator. So go to your toolbox, here you will see validation controls. Required field validator, just drag and drop wherever you want to show that, just drag and drop the required field validator. I can just keep it here. Go to source. Now it got inserted here. And the title, just remove this. So wherever you want to keep this, just go there. Where required field validator. Which one is required field here? Username. Username. It is a required field validator. Right. Now go to properties of this. Go to properties of required field. Here it should specify the configs, like what is the use of required field validator? If some field is required, if some field is mandatory, if you want to take care of that validation, like whenever I save this, it should take care of validating that. It should check whether user has provided value to the particular field or not. Okay, so then we require a required field validator. Here you need to provide few properties. What are those? Like which text box data has to be validated? So you will see control to validate. Which control has to be validated? Username. What is the name of username text box? TXT username. Are you getting me? So which control has to be validated? Yes, select that control. It is going to be TXT username. Okay, so it will take care of validating text box username data. If it is empty, it throws error. If it is not empty, it doesn't throw the error. And error message. Which error message has to be displayed? Which error message has to be displayed? So username is required. You keep something like this. Username is required. So wherever you want to keep this according to your alignments, just go and keep it there. I can keep it here also. Username is required. It will be displayed something like username is required. Okay, let's see this. And password is also mandatory. You can keep it for password also. And just copy this, and wherever you need, just paste it there. required field validated is required here also. LBL password. So control to validate txt password. Password is required. Okay, let's check this. Now, if I click and save, what happens? See here, username is required and password is required. Username is required and password is required. You can also change the text color. If you want this has to be related with red color, you can also change the text color. For example, I entered the username. Now it's gone. I entered the password. It's gone. If I remove this, see, the validation will be automatically taken care by your validation control. If you don't want to use that built-in validation control, you have to write your own code. Any questions, guys?
No, sir.
Okay. There is a use of required field validator. So wherever you need to take care of validating null data, okay, then you can make use of this required field validator. If something has to be mandated, okay, if something has to be entered by the user, then you can make use of this. It will take care of validating the data. Next, when it comes to password and confirm password, this password and confirm password should be same. Password should be same as confirm password. Okay. So for this, you can make use of another validation control that is called compare validator. Compare validator. So whenever you need to validate some control, when one control data has to be validated with another control data, then you can make use of compare validator. So go to properties. All you need to do is you need to specify control to be validated. What has to be validated after entering confirm password? Confirm password has to be validated with password text box, right? So here you need to specify control first, control to be validated. Which control to be validated here? Go to properties of this. Okay. Control to validate. Which control has to be validated? Confirm password. And control to compare. This has to be compared with which text box? Password text box. Which control has to be validated? Confirm password text box has to be validated. And control to compare. This has to be compared with what? Password. Arithmetic. And you can also select the operator. Where this should be equivalent to this. What is your validation? What is the business rules here? Equal or not equal? Greater than not equal? Less than? So in our case, it should be equal. So what it will do? After entering your confirm password, it will compare it with password. And what is the operator? Equal. It will check whether this is equivalent to this or not. If this is equivalent to this, then you will be allowed to save your data. If this is not equivalent, then you will be not allowed to save your data. Any questions, guys? And error message to be displayed. Password should be same as, or you can password and confirm passwords are not matched. Okay, here you can specify the 4 color also. Let's check this. Enter the username and password as ABCC and confirm password as ABCD. Now what happens? See, it got displayed. Password and confirm password are not matched. Did we write any code to handle this? No. So Microsoft has already built this control, this validation control. They already written that code. It knows like how to compare the value of this control with this control. All it to measure here is which control has to be validated and it has to be compared with which control. Control to validate and control to compare. Any questions, guys?
No.
No, sir.
And if I enter CC, it will be disappeared. Okay. Next, when it comes to primary and secondary, primary phone and secondary phone. Here, after I enter the secondary phone, it has to be compared with primary phone because these two should not be same. Secondary phone should not be same as primary phone. Okay. Now, which control has to be used? I can use the same validation control. What is that? Compare validator. See, and go to properties of this. Specify control to compare. Which control has to be validated? Secondary phone. And this has to be compared with which one? Primary phone. What has to be displayed? Secondary phone should not be same as primary phone. Are you getting this? Okay. Now let's see. Okay. Username, password ABC, confirm password ABC. Now I entered primary phone as 1122334455 and entered the second phone also same. What happens? Whenever I click on save, it will not mention that. F4. Control to validate secondary phone, control to compare primary phone. Okay. Save it. Next. Error message. Secondary phone should not be same as primary phone. TXT primary, TXT secondary. And we did not set the operator. Here in this case, what has to be done? The operator is not equal to. This should not be equal to this. Are you getting me? So go to properties of this. And operator by default, it is equal. But in our case, it should not be equal, not equal. Primary phone 1122334455. Secondary phone this C. Secondary phone should not be same as primary phone. If I change it, no, error message has gone. Any questions, guys?
No, sir.
Okay. So next, email. When it comes to email, it should have a specific format, right? It should contain @ as well as dot, the domain name and @. So for that, you can write your own regular expressions, and you could also make use of existing business control like regular expression validator. Regular expression validator. If you are good at writing regular expressions, you can write your own regular expression to validate anything, any type of data. But by default, this has been provided with some built-in regular expressions where you can make use of these things. Error message, first control to validate. Which control has to be validated? TXT email. Error message. Please enter a valid email ID. Next, here you have a property called expression, regular expression, where you can provide your expression. This validation expression. Click on this. So these are some default validation expressions. Here you can see French phone number. So this is a regular expression. Postal code, German phone number, and email address. Email address. So this control has been provided with some default built-in validation expressions. Okay. So if you need to validate the email, you can select it from here. Otherwise, you can write your own regular expression. It supports custom regular expressions. If you want to choose this built-in one, you can choose the built-in one, and it will generate the regular expression on behalf of you. Or if you want to write it on your own, go ahead and do that. Right now I'm selecting it as email address. There are many: internet URL, Japanese phone number, social security number, zip code. Okay, these are the commonly used things. That's it. Now go and run this. Email. I just entered it as abcgg.com. See, please enter a valid email ID. Why? Because @ is missing here. @ is, I entered it as abc @dd. A domain name is missing. See, please enter a valid email ID. Domain name is missing. It should have domain name also. No, it's gone. Any questions, guys?
No.
No, sir.
Okay, so this is something about your regular expression. And next, custom validator. If you don't want to make use of built-in program written by your Microsoft for these validation conditions, and if you want to write your own JavaScript function, okay, you can make use of custom validator. Custom validator, where you can write your own function. Here you have to specify control to validate, control to compare, enable client script is true. If I enable it, if I set it to false, it doesn't allow you to write your own function. If I set it to true, it allows you to write your own function. All right, me, and you can go ahead and write your own function. Okay. So whenever you want to write your own function, own JavaScript function, so this is a place where you can write your own function. Here you can see client validation function. Just write your JavaScript function or whatever the script that you wanted to use and provide that script here. So using custom validator, the name itself is saying custom. You can write your own. And if you keep too many validation controls on your form, for example, here I kept one validation, here I kept one validation, year one, read me, year one, year one. If I do not enter these values, click on save, what happens? All error messages will be displayed in different places, right? All error messages will be displayed in different places. Here it shows like username is required, password is required, something like this. If I do not enter anything here, for example, a test one. See, different error messages are getting displayed in different places. See, it is not looking good actually. right? Your username is required, password is required. Here some error message, some error message. If I make it mandatory, here it will show some message, here it will show some message, right? So different messages are getting different places. It's not looking good, right? So this might degrade the beauty of your web page. That's why I don't want display error message like this. I want all messages should be displayed somewhere in some common place. I want to allocate some space to display all the error messages. Whenever I click and save, it should validate the things and all error messages should be displayed at one place. So our user can see all the error messages at one place. Okay. So how do I do that? So in this case, you can make use of validation summary. So wherever you want to display that, just go and place it. Validation summary. Okay. I would like to display these error messages in the bottom of my file or somewhere outside of this readme. So wherever you want to display that validation summary, where is that? Here it is. For example, I'd like to create one more row, table row, table data, column span is equal to 2. I want to display all error messages here, right? And what has to be displayed here? If some error is occurred, here do not display that error message, rather get it highlighted with some star. I want some star has to be displayed wherever user did the mistake, that has to be highlighted with star, and the actual error message should be displayed in the common area called validation summary. I want all error message should be displayed here, and wherever he did the mistake, that has to be highlighted with some star mark. Okay, in this case, what should I do? Go here. This is your validation summary. By default, all error message will be displayed here. And you have different options to display this. Whether you want to display your error message on the form, and you could also use a dialog box to display those error messages. Read me. So here, if I say show message box is equal to true, what happens? All your error messages will not be displayed on the web form. Rather, it will make use of a dialog box to show those errors. So all your error information will be displayed in a dialog box. If I set it to false, now dialog box will not be used, and your error message will be displayed on the web page. Any questions, guys?
No.
sir.
Any questions? Now see, it is getting displayed in two places, here and here, right? But according to our record, what has to be done? Here it should not be displayed. So wherever we did the mistake, it should get it highlighted with star mark. It has to be highlighted with star mark, and the actual error message should be displayed here in the common area. So how do you do that? So every validation control comes with a property called where is that? Okay. A text, we have property called text. Here keep star mark. Now what happens? Here, if for example, if this is not satisfying the business rule, earlier we were displaying the error message. Now what happens? Instead of your error message, some star mark will be displayed. The actual error message will be displayed in the validation summary. Here it shows only star mark, but the actual message will be shown in the validation summary. And give that to all controls. Text star. Star. Right? Now it looks very clean and neat. Now see, I did not enter user and password. Here entered test. Here entered test one. Okay. Enter this one. Enter primary phone. Enter second phone. Now what is happening? See, here it got highlighted with star. It means yes, there is an error. Here it got highlighted with star. Whenever I click on save user, see, now it is showing all users at one place. It's showing all details at one place.
So the
Username
screen
is-
is stuck, sir.
Sorry?
The
Your
screen is stuck.
froze.
Okay, can you see the screen now?
Yeah, we can see, but it's stuck.
Is it same with everyone? Both of you?
It's in user registration design.
Yeah, user registration design only. Can you see these details? Here, I'm highlighting the validation summary details here.
No, sir.
Okay,
Yeah, I can see that.
now you can see. You, Dantu? Okay,
No, sir. Can you reshare it?
okay, now I'm running the application again. Okay, now I opened the browser. Can you see it now?
No, sir.
You, is it same with
No, you're still in the Visual Studio, right? Design page,
No.
registration form.
Let me stop and reshare it again. Okay, so can you see my screen now?
Yes.
Okay,
Yeah,
so let me run the application again. Okay, so as I said, here it has to be highlighted with the star, and the actual error message should be displayed in the validation summary. Okay, so that's why we change the text property of validation control to star. Okay, now let's run this. Now you can see the browser that I opened, right? Guys.
No, sir.
no, we can see the browser.
No.
It's still in Visual Studio.
Still in Visual Studio. Can you exit and rejoin?
Okay.
Okay.
Looks like this. Okay, can you see my screen now?
Yeah, we can see, but you're still in Visual Studio.
Yes, I'm still in Visual Studio only. Okay, now
Okay.
I'm going to run it. Okay. Now can you see the browser?
No, sir.
Oh,
No. The browser that I opened.
no,
No.
you're still in the Visual Studio.
Hmm. No?
Maybe your share got stuck only for this application.
Should not be like that. Okay, let me share it again. Okay, now can you see my screen? Your screen share is loading. Okay, can you see it now?
Yeah,
Visual
we can
Studio,
see the Visual Studio. Yeah.
right. Now let me run it. Now can you see the browser?
No, we still can't see it.
Still can't see?
No.
No, sir.
Okay, I got it. Now can you see? Screen
Yes.
share. Now you can see it, right?
Yeah, I can see the
Yes, sir.
browser.
Okay. So now what I did, I changed the text property of all validation controls to text because I don't want to display the entire message along with the control because it doesn't look good. Okay. So that's why I want all error message should be appeared in the common area called validation summary. And wherever we made the mistake, that particular control should be highlighted with only star. Let's make some mistakes. Email invalid. So now what is happening? See, it get highlighted with star. Right? Earlier we used to display the error message, the complete error message. Now if I click on save user, what happens? See, the actual error message got displayed in the common area. Like, oh, this looks little better, right? Rather than like displaying the error message everywhere. Right? So here wherever we made the mistake, it got highlighted with star. Right? And the actual error message got displayed over here. Username is required. Password and confirm passwords are not matched. Please enter a valid email ID. Secondary phone should not be same as primary. If I enter this, it will be gone. Your one error message will be reduced. So now you can see only 3 error messages. If I enter some validated thing, it will be gone. See, now I can see only 2. Any questions, guys?
No.
No, sir.
Okay. So these are all some kind of basic validation controls. But if you want to write your own validation logic, go ahead and do that. That is always allowed. This is something about your validation controls. And you need to be aware of 2 more concepts. And next one is going to be the authentication. 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 How do we authenticate the user? When it comes to authentication, we have 2 types of authentication. Windows and forms. The database authentication is different. This is a web authentication, right? Windows and forms. See, if you observe something like, there are 2 types of websites. Internet and intranet. Internet-based website, intranet-based website. And what is internet-based website? What is intranet-based website? For example, if you take any organization, for example, if you take any organization, Wipro, within Wipro, once you join your Wipro, you'll be provided with some laptop, right? And Wipro will have a lot of internal websites, like a website related to your finance, a website related to your rewards and recognition program, right? So a lot of internal websites will be there. So to access your internal websites, you don't have to enter any user ID and password. You don't have to enter any specific user ID and password. You'll be able to access that directly without entering any user ID and password. When it comes to some websites like Yahoo, Gmail, Facebook, can we access those sites without having our credentials, user ID and password? No. Whenever you try to access it, first you will be provided with your login screen where you need to enter your user ID and password, identity of that user. But in case of organization-based internal sites, most of the sites won't be having login screens. Because those websites, for example, if you take Wipro, the internal websites of Wipro will be accessible only within Wipro domain. If you want to access it from outside of Wipro domain, you cannot access it. Those websites are accessible within the domain. But when it comes to websites like Yahoo and Gmail, those are accessible outside of the domain also. From anywhere you can access it, irrespective of the things. So Yahoo and Gmail, these kind of websites are called public websites, internet-based websites, internet-based applications, internet-based applications. What is intranet-based application? An application which is accessible within the organization, within the same domain. That is called intranet-based applications. Like internal sites of any organization comes under this category, intranet-based. These are accessible within the same domain. Once you come outside of the domain, those sites are not accessible. And to access intranet-based applications, you don't have to enter your user ID and password. Rather, it will make use of your Windows account. What is a Windows account? To log into your system. Once you join your organization, you'll be provided with your laptop, right? So to log into your laptop, you have to enter your user ID and password. That is called your Windows account. So to authenticate the users of internal users of that organization, because once you log into your laptop given by your organization, you'll be connecting to that particular organization domain. Now you're called internal user of that domain, right? So if you want to access any website, any internal website, you don't have to enter your user and password. Rather, it will make use of your Windows account, the account that is used to log into your system. That is called Windows account. That account will be used towards authentication and authorization process. But when it comes to internet-based application, it is a public domain, right? So applications like Facebook, Gmail, these are called public domain websites. These are called internet-based web applications, where user need to enter his user ID and password. So in case of organization-based internal sites like intranet-based applications, you don't have to enter any user ID and password. This is called Windows authentication. As I said, an authentication can be implemented two ways. One is Windows authentication, another one is forms-based authentication. And which comes under Windows-based authentication? All internal sites like intranet-based applications. Intranet-based applications comes under Windows authentication. Okay, so if you want to implement any authentication in internal websites, like a website which is accessible within the domain, you can make use of Windows authentication, where user doesn't need to enter his user ID and password. It will make use of his Windows account to authenticate and authorize the user. And if you are implementing a public domain, public websites, public domain-based websites like Yahoo, Gmail, Facebook, there you cannot make use of Windows. You have to ask user to enter his user ID and password, right? So those kind of applications has to implement forms-based authentication. Okay, that is called, if you are going to implement internet-based applications, you should make use of forms-based authentication. Okay, it's very clear. In websites, an authentication can be implemented in two ways. Those are going to be Windows-based authentication, forms authentication, like your SQL server. In SQL server, whenever I need to log into SQL, I can choose either Windows or SQL. If I choose Windows, it will not ask me to enter user ID and password, right? It will make use of my Windows account to authenticate me. If I select SQL account, it will ask me to enter user ID and password. Same thing. In case of Windows-based application, user doesn't need to enter any identity, any credentials. Rather, it will make use of his Windows account to authenticate and authorize. So all internet-based intranet-based applications like organization, internal sites will make use of Windows-based authentication, because once that employee logs into our domain, why should I ask him to enter the same credentials again and again? Anyway, he has already used the Windows account to log in into system. We can make use of that same account to grant him the access to all internal sites, right? So why should I ask him to enter that same details again and again? So in this case, you can implement Windows-based authentication. When should I go for Windows-based authentication? Whenever you need to implement intranet-based application. What is an intranet-based application? An application which is accessible within the domain. Once you come outside of the domain, it won't be accessible. Those kind of applications are called as intranet-based applications. Example, the internal websites of any organization. And for those, you can make use of Windows-based authentication. If any application has to be accessible across different domains, across different public domains, then you would make use of forms-based authentication. Example, Yahoo, Gmail, Facebook, Instagram. These are called intranet-based application, which runs irrespective of the domains. Anyone from anywhere can access those applications. Here, you need to capture the actual identity of the user. That's why here, every user will be provided with a login form where user need to enter his user ID and password. In case of Windows-based authentication, there won't be any login form. We will not ask user to enter his user ID and password. Rather, we will make use of his Windows identity. In case of forms-based authentication, we will ask user to enter his user ID and password. The registration is mandatory. While registering his details, he has to choose a unique user ID and he has to enter the password. We will store that into the database. And whenever you want to access this website, he has to enter that user ID and password. We will cross-check those details with our database. If that exists in our database, we will grant him the access. Otherwise, we will reject him. Okay. So simple, when it comes to web-based application, you will see two types of applications: internet-based applications, intranet-based applications. What is an intranet-based application? An application which is accessible within the same domain is called intranet-based application. There, you need to implement Windows-based authentication. And if you are going to implement internet-based applications, like public domain-based applications like Yahoo, Gmail, Facebook, then you need to make use of forms authentication. Any questions?
No, sir.
No.
Now, where do I specify? Like, which authentication has to be used by application? Where do you specify this? Now I should tell the system, right? Whether you want to use Windows or forms. I should tell the system, hey, use Windows authentication. I use forms authentication. Where do I provide that? Okay, so here we have a tag called authentication. Authentication. Here you should specify which authentication. Mode is equal to. Here you have to specify whether you want to use Windows or forms or none, no authentication. Whether you want to use Windows authentication or forms authentication. If I choose Windows, I don't have to provide any login screen. If I choose forms, you should provide the login screen. All right, me. And third one is passport. What is a passport authentication? It's like your Google. For example, once you log in into your Gmail, now you can access all Google-based websites using the same identity. That is called passport authentication. Okay. And federated is also somewhat similar to your passport. Okay. But these are very specific. Okay. But when it comes to forms, so most of the public sites will make use of forms authentication. Okay. And all internal sites will make use of Windows authentication. If the same identity has to be used across different websites. For example, when it comes to Google, Google has a lot of things. YouTube, right? Google Ads, Gmail. There are so many things. So if you want to access all those websites, you don't have to have different accounts. Once you are registered with Google, once your Gmail ID is created, using that same account, you'll be able to access all Google websites. That is called passport authentication. The same identity will be used towards different websites of that same organization. That is passport authentication. Okay. So here you have to specify what type of authentication has to be used for your website. Whether it is Windows. If it is Windows, you don't need to provide any login things. But if it is forms, you should specify the system. Here you can see. These are all different types of Windows mode is equal to, I can say, forms. Okay. And within this, it will have a lot of other properties like forms. And you have to provide the URL of the form. If it is a forms authentication, as I said, user should be provided with login screen. Here you have to specify whenever anyone access your website, what has to be presented first. That form name has to be provided here. Your default URL, login URL is equal to, yet provide this, some login dot ASPX. Readme. If it is a Windows, no login form is required. If it is a forms, you have to provide the system. So like which, in case of forms authentication, you need to capture the identity of the user. You should ask them to enter user and password. So you should tell the system. What is the forms authentication? Like which page has to be presented first? What is the login URL? Something like this login.aspx. Now what happens whenever any user access your website? So this is a first page will be presented to the user where we are going to capture the user ID and password of the user and we will get them validated against our database. Any questions, guys?
No.
No.
Okay. Right. Next. Okay, so let's move towards the next concept. Here, I'm going to add a web form. Memory state management. This is my web form, state management. Okay. I'm going to create a button, text box and button. ASP label. ID is equal to LBL number. Text to be displayed is equal to current value. Run it is equal to server. Next. ASP text box. ID is equal to txt number. Run it is equal to server. Or simply can also keep a button. Anything is fine. ASP button ID is equal to BTN increment value text to be displayed is equal to increment. Run it is equal to server. So this concept is very, very important. So try to understand this. Okay, here we have a button. Okay. Whenever I click on this button, every time, first initially I'm going to set some value. Whenever I click on this button, for example, here I'm defining a variable. int a is equal to 10. Whenever I click on this button, every time button click event will be triggered. From here, I'd like to increment this value by 5. Every time, whenever I click on this, every time it has to be incremented with 5. I'm something like a is equal to a plus 5. Now I want to display this response dot write if. I'm just going to display this. Okay, a dot to string. Whenever I click on this button, what happens? Every time it is getting incremented with 5. Right? After incrementing this value, the latest value has to be displayed here. Okay. Now, whenever I click on this first time, what happens? It should be the initial value is 10. It has to be incremented with 5. It is going to be 15. Again, if I click on that button, how much it should be? This is going to be 15 plus 5, 20. Next, if I click on it again, it should be 25, 30, 35. Okay, let's check this. Run it. Okay, we need to change the startup form. Change the startup form to state management. Okay, now let's run it. Now, first time I'm clicking an increment. Okay. What is the value of a? 10. Now we are adding, now we are incrementing this value with 5. Okay. So now it is going to be 15. Right? A got incremented with 5. The previous value of a is 10. Now it got incremented with 5. Now it has become 15. Let's display this. See, it is 15. Now if I click on increment, what should be the value of a? If I click on increment again, what should be the output? Guys, if I click on increment again,
20.
if I again click on this, what would be the expected output here?
20.
20, right? So let's click on this. What is the value of a? Again, it is 10. It was supposed to be 15, right? Now again it is going to be 15. Again, if I click on this, what is happening here? Every time it is resetting the value to 10. That's why every time it is going to be 15 only. You can click on this n number of times. Every time it is going to be 15 only, but it should not be like this. Why? You need to understand this. Whenever I click on the button, as I said, it is a server-side implementation. We are calling it as active server pages. The entire page itself is a class. Whenever I click on increment, whatever you have written in C#, those are all server-side related things. Everything has to be processed on the server. Whenever I click on increment, what it will do, it will combine everything into request object. The request object will be sent to your server and it has to be processed on the server. Every time, if I click on 10 times, every time the request object will be sent to your server. If I click on 10 times, those 10 times your request object will be sent to server. And 10 times it has to be processed on the server. Are you with me? If I click on increment, what happens? It doesn't do anything in the client machine, in your machine. So what it will do, if I click on increment, what it will do, it will package, it will combine everything into request object. That object will be transferred to your server. And the execution will take place on the server and response will be provided. That response will come back to your client. And processing means what? Once request object comes to your server, what it will do? See, if you look into this, your state management web form is nothing but a class. What it will do, every time it creates instance of this class. Once instance gets created, everything will be reinitialized. Everything will be reset back to previous state. Are you getting me? That's why if I click on increment, what happens? Every time it will be reinitialized on the server. That's why your previous value will not be stored anywhere. Every time it will be reset. Every time it will be reinitialized. If you click on 100 times it will be reinitialized. Are you getting me? But this leads to a problem. We are losing our operational value, right? We did some operation in the previous click. When it comes to current click, we lost what we did in the previous click. Right? This leads to a problem. Because every time this entire page has to be submitted to the server and it has to be processed over there, then it will produce some response. That response will be sent back to your client. So as I said, we have two objects, request and response. The communication will be exchanged between client and server in the form of request and response. Always request should go from the client, response will come back from the server. And every time, whenever your request is processed, whatever is part of that request, every time all those things will be reinitialized. So we are not able to hold our previous results. So sending request and getting response back from the server is called as post back, right? So we are not able to hold our previous values, previous results during post back process. Once post back is happened, everything will be reinitialized back to previous state. This leads to a problem. If you are performing some operation and doing many clicks, on every click, the post back will take place. It should send request to the server, response should come back. And every click, post back will take place. Once post back is happened, the entire page data will be lost. Alright? So we are not able to hold the data during different post backs. This leads to a problem. To overcome this problem, what has to be done? Your data, your result, your operation output has to be held somewhere during different post backs. Where should I keep it? Where should I hold my data? Alright? So if you want to hold your data during different post backs, then your approach should be towards another concept, which is called state management. How do I hold it? I should hold it either in my machine or server machine. Alright? What should I do during this post back? Before sending request to the server, because once it gets processed in the server, everything will be lost. Before sending it to the server, keep it somewhere. Alright? Hold your result somewhere, then send the request. Though it is lost, still you have a chance to roll back it from somewhere, get it back from somewhere, get it restored from somewhere. But where is that somewhere? Where should I keep it? So here we have two options. The communication is getting exchanged between two machines, client machine and server machine. And where should I keep it? I should keep it either on the client machine or server machine. I have only these two options. I should keep it either on the server machine or client machine. Alright? So if you want to hold some data during different post backs, then your approach should be towards a concept called state management. This is very, very important, guys. State management. Whenever you want to maintain some state of your web form, then you'd be needing this concept. It tells you like in how many ways a state can be maintained. So when it comes to state management, a state can be maintained in two ways. Those are going to be client, and second one is going to be server. Client state management, server state. As I said, we have only two options. Either it should be stored on the client machine or server machine during post back. Alright? Store your result either on the client or server, then send the request, get it processed, then restore it back from wherever you stored it. Any questions, guys?
No, sir.
Okay, as I said, we have only two things. There is client or server. Okay, so when it comes to state management, this can be implemented in two ways: client side state management and server side state management. Next, server-side state management. When it comes to client-side state management, here we have different options to maintain. It means your data can be stored on the client machine. So when it comes to client, your data can be stored in different ways. Those are going to be cookies. You can hold your data using cookies, query strings, and third one is view state and hidden fields. When it comes to client system, you can hold your data on the client machine using these many ways. You can hold it using cookies. You can hold it using query string. You can hold it using view state. You can hold it using hidden field. And when it comes to server-side management, this can be maintained in two ways. Okay. Session application and cache. It means the data will be stored on the server. Before processing the request, you will keep your data into server. And once the request gets processed, again, you will get it written back from the server. So when it comes to server, a data can be maintained in three different ways. You can use session memory, you can use application memory, you can use cache memory. Read me. You can store it either in session, application, or cache. Okay, so let's see this. Let's see how to hold your data using cookies. Okay, any questions, guys?
No.
Okay, simple. When it comes to your login screen, here you have under Oxford, right? We already have created some users. And we have some stored process created here. Authenticate user. What does it return? You need to send username and password. It will give you the number of matches. Okay. And let's implement this. Okay, first let's go through this, then I will tell you where exactly it is useful. Okay, so let's go through the first concept, that is cookies. How do we hold our data using cookies? When it comes to cookies, here you will see two types of cookies. In-memory cookie and persistent cookie. In-memory cookie, persistent cookie. So what is the difference between these two? If I say my cookie type is in-memory, where it will be stored? So when you talk about in-memory cookie, all in-memory cookies will be stored within your browser. This web browser itself maintains some process memory. Your web browser would itself maintain some process memory. So whenever I say my cookie type is in memory, so where it will be stored? It will be stored within your web browser. If you go to source, press F12, right? Here you can see memory. Under memory, here you can see if your application using any cookies, all those things will be part of here. Here you can see cookies of this particular websites. So these are the different cookies created for this Google, right? So all in-memory cookies will be stored within your browser. If I say my cookie type is equal to persistent, it will be stored in your hard disk. All persistent cookies will be stored permanently in the user hard disk, the client hard disk. That is the difference between in-memory cookie and persistent cookie. Okay, let's see how to create this. Okay, now what should I do? Every time, once my result is calculated, then what should I do? I should keep this result into one of the cookie. Create your cookie, keep this into your cookie, Once your memory gets processed, then get it back from there. Any questions, guys?
No.
No, sir.
Okay. HTTP cookie. Some my cookie. We have a class called HTTP cookie. So this cookie will take care of creating cookies. Is equal to new HTTP cookie of, you can give cookie name. My result. My cookie dot value. What has to be stored into this cookie is equal to A has to be stored. And it comes with a property called expires. If I set expires, if I set this property, if I set this property, expire dot add this, whether you want to keep it for minutes, seconds, hours, days, if I say add hours, I can tell the system how many hours this cookie has to be maintained in my machine. Once it reaches this expiration date, it will be expired automatically. You don't have to expire it, you don't have to dispose it explicitly. If I say add hours of 1, now what happens? This cookie will be maintained. This cookie will be maintained for only 1 hour from now. After 1 hour, it will be disposed automatically from your machine. If I say add this, it will be maintained for 1 day. So if I do not specify this property, it will become in-memory cookie. By default, it will be stored in your browser. Once your browser is closed, all cookies will be destroyed. So the lifetime of in-memory cookie depends upon the lifetime of the browser. All in-memory cookies will be existing till that browser runs, till that is allowed. Once you close your browser, whatever is associated with the browser, all cookies will be destroyed automatically. If I add expire property, it will become persistent cookie. That's all. So where it will be stored? It will be physically stored in your hard disk. That's why you need to specify the expire date, when it should get expired. Any questions, guys? Any questions?
No.
A dot to string. Now we are storing this result into this. Right? Create your cookie using HTTP cookie class. And what has to be stored? Specify this. And when it comes to cookies, the cookie data will be stored in text notepad, in a text file. Cookie data will be stored in a text file. Okay. So if I do not specify this, it will be stored in your browser. If I specify this, it will be stored in your hard disk. That is the difference between in-memory and persistent. Now it will become in-memory. If I set this expiration date, it will become persistent. That is only the difference. Now calculate your result, store it back into this. Now what has to be done? Every time when I click on the button next time, from where should I restore it back? I should restore it back from cookie. Okay, let's see this first. Keep your breakpoint here. Now click on increment. Now age 10, it is going to be incremented with 15, right? Now this result has to be stored into your cookie. Create your cookie and keep that value into cookie. Now my cookie has created. I kept that value into cookie. Now where it will be stored? I did not specify any expiration date. So by default, it will be considered as in-memory cookie and it will be stored within my browser. Go to this and you can see memory, application. It is related to your application, cookies. Okay, so if you want to see any property related to your web browser, okay, just you can go and you have to make use of these developer tools. Okay. Okay. Now if I click on this again, state management, click on increment again. Again, one more cookie will be created. Again, your value will be stored into this. But what should I do? When it comes to next click, I should get it back from this cookie, because again, it is going to be 15, right? It should not be like that. The previous result has to be captured from the cookie, and that has to be incremented with 5. Okay, now what should I do? I should change my code. So if cookie, so get your cookie. HTTP cookie, my cookie, just create this object here. My cookie is equal to HTTP cookie. Now what should I do? First, I should get it. 1 second, guys. Okay, guys. So now what should I do? Every time, whenever user click on this, first I should check. For the first time, this cookie won't be existing, right? But when it comes to next click, the cookie exists. So every time I should check where this cookie exists or not. If this cookie exists, I should get value from this cookie and get it incremented with 5. Otherwise, it has to be incremented with the initial value. Okay, I should check this. How do I check this? First, get it. HTTP cookie, my cookie. My cookie is equal to, here we have a property called request dot cookies. Request dot cookies of your cookie name. Here you have different options, index and name. What is your cookie name? My cookie name is my result. What it will do, it will just check if there is any cookie with this name, and it will get that cookie store into your local variable. Now I have to check whether this is null or not. If my cookie is equal to null, if this is null, it means it is a first time request. Your cookie does not exist. Now what should I do? It has to be incremented with A. It has to be incremented with A. Write me. So you can write it here also. If the cookie doesn't exist, what should I do? I should increment this value and store it into cookie. So you have to cookie, you have to write your cookies. You have to create your cookie. And you need to write one more statement, a response dot append cookie of your my cookie. what it will do, for the first time, your cookie doesn't exist, right? It will try to get a cookie from with this name, but technically for the first time, there will be no cookie with this name. So this is going to be null. If it is equal to null, so it means it is a first time request. Get it incremented with 5. Now you have to create your cookie. My cookie is equal to UCT copy of my result. So a new cookie will be created with the name my result, and keep this value into that cookie. Now add it into your response object. Now your cookie will be updated either in the hard disk or web browser. If I set expiry proper, it will be updated in the hard disk, otherwise it will be updated in the browser. Task is done for the first time. When it comes to second time, else, what happens? When it comes to second time, yes, this is not going to be null because I already created my cookie in the previous run. Now it will be there, it will be available, right? Now this is not going to be null, it is going to be else case. Now what should I do? I should not again do the same thing, right? I should not do this because I have stored this previous result into cookie. So I have to get that result, and that result has to be incremented. I mean, now A is going to be previous result. A is equal to my cookie dot value. So whatever is there in my cookie, okay, so it will be stored in the form of a string. Just convert it into convert dot 2 into 32 of. Right? What is there in my cookie? The previous result. I'm just getting the previous result from the cookie and storing it into A. Now A has to be incremented with 5. A is equal to A plus 5. Okay. For the first time, it will be incremented with 5. Create your cookie, keep that result into your cookie. When it comes to second time, cookie exists. So it will go to else part. Now get that previous result back from your cookie and store it into A. Now that previous result is going to be incremented with 5. Again, store it back. Store it back. Now what should I do? Again, I store this result back to cookie and append it. Any questions, guys?
No,
No.
sir.
Okay. Now write response dot write. So let's keep a breakpoint and see. Increment. First time. Now I'm going to search a cookie with this name. But technically, we did not create any cookie, right? It is going to be null. If it is null, what it will do? It will just increment the value with 5 and create a new cookie with my result and update that to your response object. Now 15 got incremented. Okay. If you press F12, you will go to this thing. So now I can see my cookie. See cookies, under cookies. Now I can see my cookie, my result 15, right? Where it is getting stored? It is an in-memory cookie. So it has been stored within process memory, browser memory. Okay. And click on it again, increment. Now what it will do? It will search for my result again. Now it exists. In the previous run, it was not there, but now it exists. See, now I got my cookie, right? Now what I will do? It is not going to be null. So it will go to else case. See, now I got my value back, 15. This is previous result. Now previous result will be incremented with 5. Now it is 20. Now what I'm doing? Again, I'm storing it back to cookie. Now I can see. Not appended. set cookie of my. Now see 20. 25. Right? What it is doing? So every time it will go to false. Now it will get the previous value. The previous value is 30. The previous value is 25. Now it got incremented with 5. Now what we are doing? We are keeping the latest response into that. Now it is 30. Right? Now it is 30. Now click on it again. What you will do? Again, we'll get it back from this. The previous value is 30. Now it will get incremented with 5. It is going to be 35. Right? So we calculated the result, again saving it back to cookie and updating it. First time use append cookie, it will add the cookie. Second time set cookie, it will update the cookie value. Right? Now we are able to hold the data during different post backs. Right? Any questions, guys?
No, sir.
Okay. So this is something a good cookie, but the problem is cookie data is visible to the end user. Whether you will store it within the browser or in hard disk, it will be visible. If anyone is aware of this, they can easily erase the data. So there is no security for your data. There is no security for your data. So that's why if you want to provide security for your data, then your approach should be towards either hidden field or view state. Hidden field or view state. Okay. So how do I store it using a view state? So the same thing can also be achieved through a view state. So when it comes to view state, view state is more secure compared to your cookie, where data is not visible because data will be encrypted automatically and that will be stored using hidden fields. Okay, so let's try to run this using view state. Now what I will do, I will use view state in place of cookies. How do I create a view state object? So we have a view state. View state. So what should I do? If view state of some variable like your cookie, my previous result is equal to null. Same thing. If cookie is equal to null, then what has to be done? So perform your operation and store this result into view state. View state of is equal to A. Now what happens if I say something like this? View state of some variable name is equal to some value. So it will create a view state variable with the name my previous result. And this will be stored within your browser's process memory. And this data will not be visible to the end user. It's very difficult to hit this. Okay. Now, next time else. First time, obviously, this won't be there. Now what it will do? It will perform the operation and create a view state variable, keeps your value into this. Second time, else. Obviously, it will be there. Now what should I do? I should get it back from view state. I mean, A is equal to convert dot 2 into 32 of your view state result. So we're trying to get it from view state. Okay. So in view state, everything will be stored in the form of an object. You can store a complete data table, you can store a single value, but everything will be stored within the object format. So that's why here we are storing a number, but internal will be stored in the object format. That's why when you want to retrieve it, again, unboxing has to be done. That's why I'm trying to convert it back to original format. Now perform your operation. A is equal to A plus 5. Store it back. Store it back. Any questions, guys? Same. If cookie is equal null, perform your operation, create your cookie, and keep that value into cookie. Else, get it back from your cookie, perform your operation, again store it back into your cookie. Any questions, guys?
No, sir.
No.
And for the first time, it is going to be null. Click on increment. Obviously, it is going to be null. So now ViewState will be created. This is a ViewState object. Count is 1. We have created one variable. Keys. Okay. That is my previous result. Okay. Now the value will be stored into this. Next. The result is 15. When I click on increment, now it is not going to be null. It will go to else part. Get it back from there. Now what is the value of A? Previous result 15. Incremented with 5. 20. Now store it back. Right? 20. 25. Right? Now we are able to hold data. Okay. And using ViewState. When it comes to ViewState, ViewState is not visible to the end user. Like your cookies. Not like your cookies. Cookies are visible to the end user. But ViewState is not visible to the end user. Any questions, guys?
No,
No.
sir.
Okay. So this is something about ViewState, and internally ViewState will make use of, but actually where does it stores your data in case of ViewState? So ViewState will make use of some hidden fields. Here, you can also create some hidden fields in your form. You can also create some hidden fields. How do I create a hidden field? Here, we have a control called ASP hidden field. ASP hidden field. ID is equal to HDN1 and value is equal to some text. You can create a number of hidden fields based on your requirement, and you can also hold your data using hidden fields. If you store something in hidden field data will not be lost. Hidden field will be sent to the server, though the request is processed. After your request is processed, still it will be set back to your hidden field. So if something is stored into hidden field, it will be persisting during different post banks. So your ViewState will also make use of hidden fields to save your data. Any questions, guys? And
No,
next
sir.
one is
No.
query string. So why do we need a query string? For example, what is a query string? If I type Google, here you can see search hyphen, let's say google.com. I'm just typed it as google.com, right? Now, I'm going to search for something studies or something. Cost for 2 GB data online. Now here you can see too many things. What is this? Google.com/search. After question mark, you can see Q is equal to. Within the browser, Q is a variable. Within the browser, E is storing something. Within the browser URL. Right? This is browser URL. Browser URL itself maintains some memory. And it is limited. Right? Within the browser URL, we are storing Q is equal to something, some value. Right? So this Q is called query string. When it comes to query string values will be stored within the browser URL memory. This is a URL plan, right? Browser URL itself maintains some memory. So whenever you talk about query string, it will be stored within the browser memory. I mean, I can store something like this. Instead of ViewState, I can use query string. We have a class called request. Request.query string of my previous result is equal to null. Then you can add your query string to your request. How do I add it? Get your URL, current URL. Request dot URL. This is my current URL. Is equal to request dot URL. Right? Dot absolute URI. It will give absolute URI or original string absolute path dot to string plus. How do I add it? If any query string needs to be added to your URL, it should be added something like this. Question mark. My previous result is equal to a dot to string. Return. Or you can also form URL. Request.URI of. So what it will do? For example, let's say, I'll show you something, another thing here. From here, I'd like to redirect you to some other web page. Let's say user registration. And when we redirect the user from one web page to another web page, I'd like to pass some data from one web page to another web page. How do I do this? Here we have a response dot redirect. Here give the URL of the page. What is the URL of the page? User registration. User registration. Dot ASPX. And I'm attaching a query parameter. My previous result is equal to a dot to string. Now what it will do? So query string parameters are useful when you want to pass something from one web page to another web page. Query strings are useful when you want to pass something from one web page to another web page. For example, I want to pass this result to next web page, and this is going to be used another process in the next web page. Whenever you need to pass something from one web page to another web page, then this is useful. Now what it will do? We are redirecting the user to user registration. And while redirecting the user, now I need to send something to user registration page. How do I send it? I need to attach a query parameter, query string parameter. And using this query string parameter, you can send something. So where it will be stored? It will be stored within the browser process memory. Now if you click on increment, see what happened? Here you can see. Now I got redirected to registration page, right? But here, see, I stored something within registration page. What happened? When I redirected the user, I attached one query parameters, and you can attach more than one query parameter also. Ready me? So we could also store some data within browser URL memory. That is query string. But when should I go for query string? When something has to be passed, when some value has to be passed from one web page to another web page, one website to another website, that can be passed in the form of a query string. Any questions, guys?
No, sir.
No.
Okay. And how do I attach them? Simple. Just this is your URL. End of your URL, keep a question mark. Because system need to understand what is URL and what is query parameter. whatever is there after question mark, this entire thing will be treated as a query parameter. And not only one parameter, you can attach more than one parameter. How do I attach it? If you want to add one more parameter, how do I do this? I should use ampersand symbol. Some a is equal to 15. Ampersand b is equal to 20. Now what I'm doing, I'm attaching more than one query parameter. Let's see this. See. Now I sent 3 different values to another web page. Previous result, A value and B value. So if you want to attach more than one query parameter, you have to use ampersand symbol. Okay. Now I'll tell you. So whenever you need to maintain some data between different postbacks, as I said, it can be maintained in 2 ways: client-side memory and server-side memory. When it comes to client-side memory, we can maintain it in different ways like cookies, query string, view state. But when should I choose cookie? When should I choose query string? And when should I choose view state? Simple. Query string data is visible. Here, see, here I can clearly see. Right? The query string data is visible to the end user. So there is no security for your data. But if the data is not that much sensitive, right? If you need to send some, like identities like employee ID or something, that kind of things from one page to another page. If you want to send some numbers or some values, like small amount of data, which is in KBs, when you need to send some data from one web page to another web page, make use of query string. When you need to send small amount of data, like small numbers, some values, when you need to send some values from one web page to another web page, then make use of query string. And there is no security for your data because it will be directly visible in the URL. And when you want to hold something, because if something is stored in the query string, that will be stored within URL memory. If I close that browser, it will be lost. If you want to maintain that data for a long time, for 1 day, 2 day, 3 day, then your approach should be towards cookie. Cookie will be stored physically in your hard disk, in a text file. There you can set the expiration date, whether you want to hold it for 1 day, 2 day, 3 days. When you need to hold data for a long time, based on your requirement, then cookie is the better option. Query string is not the better option because what is the lifetime of a query string? It will be existing till your browser is open. Once I close the browser, it will be closed. Everything will be destroyed. If you want to hold it for a long time, use cookies. But when it comes to cookies, the data will be stored in hard disk. It won't be visible. But if someone is aware of where cookies are getting stored, you can go to that location and erase that information. Right? So there is no much security for cookie also. And if you want to hold, and next, when it comes to cookies, you cannot hold a large amount of data. You cannot hold a large amount of data. If you need to hold small amount of data for a long time, cookie is a better option. And that if that is not that much sensitive, if it is not a confidential data, then better cookie is a better option. If you want to hold your data during your process, if that should not be visible to the end user, if that should not be visible to the hackers, if you want to hold it more securely, and if you want to hold large amount of data, then ViewState is the right option. Any questions, guys?
No.
No, no, sir.
Okay. Next, this is about client. And when it comes to server, you could also hold your data on the server. That can be held using session, application, and cache. When it comes to session, this can be held in 3 ways. In process, state server, and SQL server. A session data can be maintained in 3 ways. in process, state server, and SQL server. When it comes to session, for every client request, one separate session will be created on the server. To process that client request, some amount of memory will be allocated that particular session, and all your requests will be stored within that session memory. Whenever any user request comes to the server, a temporary memory will be created that will be available to only that client. The temporary area is called session. First, what is application? Whenever I start my website in web server, whenever I start my website in my web server, so to process all requests related to your website, some memory will be allocated. That is called application memory. That is called application memory. For every website, some amount of memory will be allocated in the server. That is called application memory. And within that application, for every user request, for every client request, one separate sub memory will be created. That sub memory is called your session. So where session will be created? Session will be created within application memory. So session is a subset of application. Application is a global memory. If something is stored in application, any session can access it. Any user can access it. But when it comes to session, it will be specific to only that particular user. For every user, one temporary memory will be created within the application, and that will be available to only that user. So session data will be available to only that particular user, but application data will be available to all the users. Any questions, guys?
No, sir.
No.
So when it comes to session, a session can be maintained in 3 stages. It means it can be stored in 3 different places. I can store within the process. I can store in state server. Every machine will have a state server. Every client machine will have a state server. I can also store it in a SQL server. Okay. So that depends upon your requirement. If some data has to be held during your process, and if that has to be destroyed after completing your operation, make use of in process. The lifetime of in process depends upon lifetime of your session. It will be existing till your session is alive. Once your session is destroyed, and whatever is stored into session will be destroyed. Or if you want to store outside of this, this is called out process. Outside of process. In process, out process. In out process, here, if I use in process, the data will be stored within the session memory. If you want to get it stored outside of your process, then your approach should be towards either state server or SQL server. What is the advantage of having it outside of the process? If I keep it outside of the process, this can be reused by other sessions also. This can be reused by other sessions also, other users also. If I store it within the process, this will be useful to only this session. If you want, this has to be available to some other session, some other website. Then it has to be stored outside of the process. Outside of your session. Where do you store it? You have 2 options, either state server or SQL server. But what is the difference between these two? If you want to store it something permanently, if something has to be stored permanently, yes, you can use either state server or SQL server. But I can store something permanently in state server. But the disadvantage of state server is once your system gets restarted, whatever is there in the state server, it will be lost. The lifetime of the state server depends upon your system. If the system is restarted, state server will also be restarted. So everything, whatever is there in the state server, it will be lost. And if you want to keep it for a long time, irrespective of the things, then you can store it in the SQL server. Any questions, guys? If the session data is stored in SQL server, not only your website, this can be accessed by other websites also, other servers also. So a session data can be maintained within the process or outside of the process. When it comes to outside of the process, you can store it either in state server or SQL server. Okay. Now, how do I store it? How do I mention this? Now I should tell the system, right, where to keep my session data. Same thing. Go to web.config. Here you can specify this. Here we have a tag called session. Looks like it is already there. Compilation HTTP and control F session. Here you can see session state. Session state. Here I can specify mode is equal to. Here you can see in process, or if it is out process, state server or SQL server, or custom. If you want to store it somewhere in the cloud or somewhere, you can make use of custom. By default, if you do not specify any mode, by default, it is in process. If you want to maintain it outside of process, specify that thing, whether it is state server or SQL server. If it is a SQL server, then you have to provide the details of your SQL server, like who is the provider and what you store it. So the details of that SQL server has to be provided. See, you can see SQL connection string has to be provided. Where do you want to store it? If it is in process, no need to specify anything. By default, the session mode is in process. If you want to maintain it outside of that, it should be either state server or SQL server. If it is a SQL server, the connection string has to be provided. Any questions, guys? And here I'm going to use in process. Okay, and how do I store it? Simple. In case of this, I'll just use session. Session of, application of, cache of, that's it. Session of. Here what I will do, I will store this into session. For the first time, it won't be there, it is null. And second time, for the first time, keep your result into this. And when it comes to second time, this is going to be session. Session. That's it. What it will do, your previous result will be stored within the session. Session means where it will be stored. It will be stored on the web server, on the server side, not in my local machine. The data will be stored on the server. And here we specified the state mode as session mode as in process, where it will be stored within the session, within the process. Any questions, guys?
No, sir.
No.
No. 15, 20, 25. I'm able to get it from server. And if you want to store something into application, yes. Application. What is the difference between session and application? Application memory will be created only once throughout the lifetime. Whenever you host your application, once your application is started, one common global memory will be created. That is called application memory. And within that application memory, for every user, one separate session will be created. If I store something into session, that will be available to only that user. But if I store something into application, that will be available to all sessions, all session users. That is the difference between session and application. And when it comes to caching, it will make use of your RAM. Cache means RAM. The data will be stored on the RAM. So this is something about your state management. Any questions, guys? Now, when should I go for this? Whenever you need to hold something on the server, if some configuration values related to your website, if some small amount of data that has to be available to global all users, then application is the right option. Hold it in your application memory. Example, I wanted to know like how many users are accessing my application. Each user is nothing but one session. Within the application memory, for every user, one separate session will be created. Let us assume that 10 different sessions are created. Means how many people are accessing my application? 10 people. If 20 people are accessing your application, 20 sessions will be created, right? Number of sessions is nothing but number of active users. If you want to maintain that kind of data at application level, at website level, and use application memory, if I store something into application, will be accessible to all session users. And if something has to be specific to that particular user or session, then go with session memory. And in session memory also, it can be maintained within the process, outside of the process. If I store something in process, within the process, it will be available to only this particular session. And once this session gets completed, destroyed, and whatever is stored in your session will also be destroyed. If you want to keep it outside of the process, then your approach should be towards either state server or SQL server. I can store my data permanently either using state server or SQL server, but the problem is if I keep it in state server, if my system gets restarted, everything will be lost. So if you want to keep it for a long time, go with SQL server. And if I store something into SQL server, it is a database server. Data will be stored permanently, irrespective of the things, and it can be accessible by other teams, other servers, other websites also. If I'm storing something in my session, if that has to be available to other websites, then make use of SQL server. Okay, and if you want to store some small amount of data to speed up, if the user is requesting frequently for the same thing, if something is being requested frequently, the same thing is being requested frequently, better hold it in your cache. Okay, any questions, guys? So this is something about web server state management. Okay, and irrespective of the technology, whether it's Java or .NET, everywhere you will see the same concept in Java, .NET, any web-based application. Whenever you want to hold something during postbacks, different postbacks, that has to be held either on the client machine or server machine. If you want to hold it on the client machine, you will have these options: cookies, query string, view state. If you want to hold it on the server, you will have three options: application, session, and cache. Okay. So we have discussed the core concepts in ASP.NET. Okay. And here also, like, like your data grid view, if you want to present your data in a table format, here also you will have data grid view and other options. Same thing. Let me see. Okay, same thing. And apart from that, you will also have other, data controls. If you want to present your data in tabular format, okay, so like the way how we present it in our Windows application, here also same thing. Get data, assign the data source, and bind it. That's all. Like the way how we did for your drop down list and other things. Okay, so in .NET 1.0, 2.0 up to 4.0, we used to develop all types of applications using ASP.NET. But when MVC has been introduced, we start developing the websites using classic ASP.NET because here the files are tightly coupled. For example, if you take this ASP.NET, it will have its code behind file. These two files are, like tightly coupled. So if something is tightly coupled, what happens? It cannot be reused and it will be recreated for each and every user. Right? So to decouple the things, to increase the reusability, to make it more reusable. So Microsoft has introduced another powerful framework, that is MVC. Okay, so nowadays every application is being developed using MVC and MVC core. Okay, so there we will discuss everything, like how to connect. So far we have seen how to connect to a database using ADO.NET. Okay, now we will see the powerful architecture MVC, how to design your web application using MVC architecture and using entity framework, that we will see in MVC as well as MVC core. So we will start MVC from tomorrow. Any questions, guys? I thought like before coming to MVC, you should also be aware of at least some core concepts of ASP.NET, the legacy system. Okay. Now you know how to create a web page, how to connect to a database, how to play with different controls, right? And how to maintain the state at the client as well as on the server machine. And how to handle the authentication mechanisms. As I said, we have two types of authentications, Windows and Forms. If you're going to implement intranet-based applications like organization-based applications, which is accessible within the organization, within a particular domain, make use of Windows authentication, where user doesn't need to enter username and password. If you're going to design a public website like Yahoo, Google, Gmail, you have to make use of Forms authentication, where user has to be presented with a login screen, and you should ask him to enter username and password. Any questions, guys?
No, sir.
Okay, so from tomorrow
No.
onwards, we'll start learning the MVC. That is very, very important. It is going to be the last session, MVC and MVC.NET Core. Okay. And once you join your application, I think most 99% you'll be working on .NET Core or MVC.NET.
Okay.
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 Right, guys, we'll meet tomorrow.